I now invite Phil. Please come over, Phil, being assigned the job of introducing. Phil is the CEO of International Education Association of Australia. It's all yours, Phil.
Thank you. Namaste, Sat Sri Akal, Salam Alaikum. Ladies and gentlemen, to my Vice President of IEAA here, but particularly Professor Renyi, particular thank you to Nishi, who has stepped into the big shoes of the man next to him, Ravi. It now means that instead of getting one WhatsApp message every day, I get at least two every day, one from Ravi and one from Nishi. But and sometimes I have to work out, which one's 100% and which one's 110%. But I'm being diplomatic. But ladies and gentlemen, I had the honour since we last met in the Gold Coast, and we had a really good, fun night on the Gold Coast. I had the honour of being asked by the federal government late last year to host the official welcome dinner in Melbourne for our Education Minister from India, Minister Pradhan. And you will think this is interesting because I went to a lot of trouble to make sure that we got a room overlooking the Melbourne cricket ground. If you're going to bring an Indian minister to Melbourne, you have to make sure that you have the Melbourne cricket ground right there in front of them. And that night, the lights were all magically lit up, and I waited for him and his delegation, and in they came. I took him over to the window. I said, "There, Minister, we have the holiest of holies, the MCG." And he said, "I don't like cricket." I thought I've found the only Indian in over 1 billion people who does not like cricket, but he loves football. Okay, so he grew up near Calcutta, and I didn't know that if you grew up near Calcutta, they follow football very, very strongly compared to cricket. But I'm sure he still knows all the cricket scores. Minister Pradhan also has developed a very strong relationship with our Minister, Education Minister Jason Clare, and I went with our Minister to India. I had the honour of going there with some of our Vice-Chancellors and other peak body representatives in March this year. And the two ministers went off together privately and went off to the India Gate. And it's always a worry for government, public servants who are ministers when ministers go off by themselves. But anyway, they had a very nice time together at the India Gate. So I said to Minister Jason Clare, our minister today, that when we go back together, we're going to Ahmedabad in 3 weeks' time, just to Ahmedabad. I said to him, well, after you've been to India Gate in Delhi, then what are we going to do with you as a special thing with the Indian minister in Ahmedabad? And I suggested to him that maybe he hops in Prime Minister Modi's chariot and goes around the stadium. But our minister's too polite and too discreet. He said no, he thinks he'll let Prime Minister Albanese do the chariot in the stadium rather than him. So looking forward to going back to India with our minister in a few weeks' time. Ladies and gentlemen, policy changes. So there's been a lot talked about, and a lot of you are probably concerned about where does this take your business going forward. And of course, some of those policies we don't yet know. And as my good friend Yagvan just explained to you on behalf of AUIDF, we've got rid of the COVID visa, and that was a really good thing. Too many students were jumping on to a full-time work visa. We've put the cap back on work rights. And in fact, I made the recommendation that we not go back to 20 hours a week, that we go to 24 hours a week. Why? Because it's very difficult for students going from uncapped to capped. And I said, we can argue that's 3 days work every week and 4 days study every week. So there's a logic there to 24 hours a week work. And it also makes us, coincidentally, more competitive than UK, New Zealand and USA. It's only 20 hours a week. Importantly though, the government decided that they're going to get rid of the GTE, and the way that they're working on that policy, we believe that there'll be no more 300-word statement. Some of you are so good with your students that you get them to a 100-page statement, but it's meant to be only 300 words. But the 300-word statement will hopefully be gone. And also, the government is very keen to ensure that students will be able to say, as part of the new genuine student entry test, that they would like to migrate to Australia. No more penalty for saying that maybe I would like to migrate and become a citizen of Australia. Why is that important? Because another very key policy of this reformist government, the Albanese government, has been to extend the post-study work right, 485 visas, from 2 to 3 years to 4 to 5 years. And not for everything, but for qualifications which we've identified as being very important for Australia's future. And I had the honour of being on the 5-person working group that the two ministers, our Immigration Minister and, our Home Affairs Minister and our Education Minister put together. And we took advice from professionals from Jobs and Skills Australia about which qualifications should get an extra 2-year 485 post-study work right. And they were mainly IT, allied health, and of course education. So we didn't please everybody, as Youngman knows. Quite a few universities and quality providers missed out on the extra 2 years. For example, if they had a Bachelor of Cyber Security and it was coded as a Bachelor of Business in brackets Cyber Security, then it might have been regarded as more business degree than cyber degree, and so in many cases missed out on the extra 2 years. Again, we're very pleased that the Education Department have agreed to have a working group with public university and with quality private providers, and that working group is, as we speak, looking at flexibilities to try and allow for some of these unusual coding situations to be fixed. So I think we all agree, if you're going to invite any young person to your country and they're going to be studying here for average of 4 years, and then you're going to give them a 4 to 5 year post-study work right visa, 485 visa, then that's 1 full decade of their life, 10 years of their life. And you can't then say goodbye, go home. You have to ensure that they are, like Canada, that there are genuine, more transparent migration pathways. And so we're looking forward in a few weeks' time to seeing the migration review, which has been put together by our Home Affairs Minister. There may be some challenging policy issues in that document. For example, in the discussion paper about migration review, they have talked about lifting the English language entry levels by 0.5 of the IELTS or equivalent Pearson's ETS TOEFL band. Sasha? Just thought I'd throw that in. I'm glad you're looking colourful tonight. They're looking at increasing by 0.5 for a number of the entry levels. Now, what that will probably mean is that there will be probably more English language teaching that might be pushed offshore. So there might be a business opportunity for some of you. You can open an English language college, but I'm not going to recommend that. But the important point being that we are really going for quality students over quantity. We all heard from our minister this morning that we are now back to pre-COVID enrolment levels. We already have an issue, some of you are aware of, in our big cities of accommodation problems. I think most Indian students and Nepalese students, they find a way to get accommodation no matter what. But in the media in Australia, there is this commentary that it's difficult to get a bed, that rental increases the fault, some media say in Australia, of more international students coming in. And so the government's in a difficult position, like the UK government is. They're in a difficult position because the media talk about rental crisis and rents going up. So we have to work very carefully on that issue. But overall, I think we'd all agree that compared to a year ago, we're back in business, we're back doing very well, but we really do want to make sure that Australia stays as a quality education destination, not just a quantity education destination. Now, the other issue that I think might be of a small interest to some of you here would be the regulation of education agents. And of course, there is already a announcement that transferring students between courses or between providers onshore will not allow for commission. That will not happen overnight. For that to happen, it requires a change to our ESOS, Education Services of Overseas Student, the National Code and or the legislation. So whilst I'm sure many of you are thinking about where that leaves you, I know that AAERI have been fantastic with Ravi and with Nishi and the committee, having argued for many years that we have to try and cut out the lack of quality when it comes to certain agents' behaviour, because it damages everybody, and AAERI have taken a strong stand about offshore agents being the key agents who should be recognised, and the commission levels being made much more transparent where possible. But this policy of no commission for student transfers, we still have to work that out. There's still some issues that many of you legitimately, and many of our universities even, under Yogvin's leadership, have raised as being a concern, where you have a genuine student who wants to genuinely change courses or change providers after 6 months. So we haven't finalised that, but it has been an announcement that some of you are aware of. The other issue is that from next week, we believe there will be the recommendations of the Joint Standing Committee on Foreign Affairs and Trade's inquiry into tourism and international education. And there's about 25 recommendations, and I can't tell you too much, but I know that at least one of those recommendations is going to call for regulation of education agents. But that will be directed at onshore agents. It won't be, it's very difficult for any government to regulate offshore agents as well. There has also been discussion about MARA, the Office of Migration Agents, being expanded to include education agents. IEAA has concerns about that because we always try and keep the role of a migration agent separate from the role of an education agent for all the right reasons. So compared to the Gold Coast, many of you were there last year, it's really overall a very good news policy situation. We've got a government that really does care for our international education community. We've got ministers that really are very strong supporters of everything we're doing. And importantly, there's an acknowledgement in the last year that we now have a global competition for skills around the world. And Australia cannot have policies that are too strict that means that we fall behind other countries as a result of that. And of course, I was in the UK 2 weeks ago, and the UK have their own issues. Many of you know that with the whole issue, you cannot bring your partner as a student. That's caused a lot of students to look to other countries like Australia. Many of you know, of course, that in the UK, there's very big accommodation issues. And many of you know as well that with the election in the UK next year, the political parties are talking about too many students and so on. So I talked to my UK colleagues about their problems, and they said, well, in the UK we're declining student numbers because Australia's now open and we've caught up again with them. I won't talk about Canada. Canada's got its own issues, as we know, and we wish that to be resolved as amicably as possible. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for having me, as always. We've got our IEA President's Dinner on tonight, which I now have to go to welcome our guests to the IEA President's Dinner. I look forward to saying hello to many of you in the next 2 days, and thank you again to Nishi. And it was great that we were able to get a meeting for Nishi and the AAERI Executive Committee to meet with my friend Julian Hill, who is the co-convener with me of the Government National Council for International Education. Julian Hill MP met with Nishi and colleagues, I think 2 days ago in Melbourne, and so he was able to give very good information from the political side, of course. So have a great night. Sorry I can't join you for dinner, but look forward to working with you.